Well, I think it's always quite humbling, and it's quite impressive when the audience, or when you do something, the audience wants more of something, especially when you put so much work and love into a property. So when the studio came back and asked us to expand out with an ancillary project, we really put our heads together, and Lionsgate and Basil Iwanek had this script called Ballerina. And because we had some kind of thread with the Ruska Roma in John Wick's 3 and 4 with ballerinas and the director's place in the orphanage, we thought that was a very good tie-in, so we started for that. So the first thing was, okay, what character, what POV are we taking this from? And through Shay Hatten's script, it was a ballerina who had lost her family, and that was the idea that started it. So then we went on the search, and we found Ana de Armas, and I was a big fan of hers way back from even before Bond. When we had the talk about what was going to be required to be, literally the lead of a John Wick style film with the action and the mythology, that was a big concern. Or do you have somebody that has the inspiration, the aspiration to do something like that? And you could just see Anna's eyes light up. She's like, yes. And everybody says yes until you get to the training facilities and stuff. So then you get there and you see the character start coming alive week after week of the training of the guns, the martial arts, the stunt work. And you can see her eyes getting bigger and bigger every time, and you're like, okay, we've got the right person. So in fact, the more training we did with her, the more we could expand the parts, the more we could expand the mythology, and the more we could just, it's just like with the formula we used with Keanu Reeves. The more Keanu expanded, the more his skills got better, the more he got deeper and deeper into the mythology, the more fun we could have with the character. So when you have somebody like Ana de Armas, who's that enthusiastic about the training and the character, has that little nod to humor, who gets the tone of what we're trying to do, then sky's the limit. We can keep writing, we can keep developing and choreographing to expand the universe as much as we can without it feeling false or forced, or like we're just trying to, for the sake of doing more business, to try and just add on to the franchise. So I think you get a uniqueness, you get a different kind of authorship, you certainly get a different flavor and perspective than we would have done myself or Keanu in that, because we had an opportunity to expand out with a character who is literally just becoming. Anna's character in the film, she's just being exposed to the world, so the audience gets a fresh perspective on what the John Wick universe is like. Again, when we sit down and we start doing the action design concepts for a film, it's never quite, we don't write on a big whiteboard going, stay practical, no CG. Like, we're happy to slide in and out. For us, it's all sleight of hand. We want the audience to believe in the character. When you see Keanu, you're not just seeing John Wick, you're seeing Keanu Reeves as John Wick perform things. And I think all people like seeing something very intricate or very cool or very well performed live. And we try to take that theatrical aspect of things and put it into the stunts. So if we can make you believe that the stuntmen are really being hit by cars and shot and thrown off of things or lit on fire, that's great for us. But it does have a flip side to that. I can only really do that if I have a performer, if I have my Fred Astaire, if you have your Buster Keaton. You need somebody to actually be performing that to help, with the sleight of hand of everything we're doing. We need our lead dancer to do all the stunts, to do the choreography. So that takes memory, that takes skill, it takes time, it takes dedication. It's not coming in and out of the gym for an hour a day, it's going in and out of the gym 6 to 8 hours a day, and then going home and doing your homework from there and coming back in and doing it day after day. I'm sure it's very fun for most people for the first week, maybe a little even into the second week. By the 16th week, it's probably not as enjoyable to keep it up and keep that level of intensity going. So you need somebody with that kind of intensity and that kind of dedication. I was talking to Keanu about this, about how we saw the world expanding, whether it was through our TV show or anime or other features. And I think he put it best when, if you're looking at the world like this, if you're watching John Wick do something, if you just pan the camera over a little bit, what's the parallel stories happening at all these continuous timelines? And I think, if you're watching John Wick 3, as that's going on, you just pan the camera a little bit over and you get to watch someone else doing it. Because you're not trying to spin off the John Wick character. You're not trying to just have a different universe or a different storyline. These are all continuous stories in this wacky, crazy, wonderful world of, Shambara films, wuxia films, modern day westerns, fantasy films all rolled into the John Wick universe. And again, you're just pulling the camera back to what we're already doing, and you get to see different aspects that we didn't get to, or that John Wick, at least in the films, didn't get to explore. So for us, it's nothing but opportunity and fun to try other things and to try characters doing the same, mold of action, but not having the John Wick storyline or having to complete or get out or all these. So it gives us different character arcs. It's always funny when you talk about your work. You never why people like it. Keanu and I just try to make a movie with things that we like in it. So if you like, fantasy-esque action, if you like martial arts, if you like music, if you like, museums, and if you like this subversive world with subtext and mythology, if you like diving in and seeing, some, I would say some little crazier than average action, like you're going to like it. If you like seeing storytelling from kind of a different perspective that's not, I would say, the norm, then yeah, I think you'd like Ballerina. And of course, Ana de Armas, she brings something fresh to a world that we already had. She brings a certain energy, she brings a naivety, she brings, I don't know, that new fresh perspective into the world. It's like, we're already in Wonderland, and now you get to see Alice go into it, and you get to follow her through it, and you get that wonderment that someone going in for the first time would have. I think coming from a background in the stunt community, you get exposed to a lot of different specialists. We have our car specialist, our horse specialist, our rigging specialist, our fire specialist. And there's so many different aspects that we just haven't had time to do in a John Wick film because we have so many other things to do that, is always on our list of things to do with this massive fire sequence. We wanted to do a gun fu fight with flamethrowers. When Len and the guys came to us about, we want to do this in an alpine village, we're like, well, this makes sense to try to put it in. And we did some tests to make sure that we could do it safely and design a flamethrower propellant rig and the safety gear necessary to withstand prolonged exposure to flamethrowers for our stunt team. And after the test, we're like, okay, great. We did our fire hose and we did our flamethrower. And the result was, in person with no digital enhancement was very impressive. So we thought that would be a good third act elevation to the action. Pretty fucking amazing. Ana de Armas is so fucking awesome that I can barely contain myself. I think one of the most impressive things about Ballerina is Ana de Armas and what she brings to it, both with character and the subtlety. It's a fresh perspective between the complete dedication to the training, to all those little micro tweaks to the character, so that you can have a little naivety, you can have this great introduction to the John Wick world with this, again, you see Anna's character and she's a little blown away by what's going on. So we're learning about the world with her, and I think that brings a whole new fresh perspective to the John Wick universe.
Winston and Sharon were like the two rocks or whatever. They go back with John way back. I think the two characters that they really needed were those two characters. Because it's the same, not the same storyline, but there's a similarity, I think, in how Winston met John in the first place, in a different, because he and both Wick and Eve Macarro, I'll call them now John and Eva. John and Eva, I think there was some similarities of how he met them. He perhaps rescued them from some family dynamic, from this family, the Ruska Roma, or is he part of Ruska Roma? And now in this one, when you start off with it, Winston and Eve meet when she's an 8-9-year-old kid, and he's been, I think, for the last 20 years or whatever, waiting for her to turn up. He knows she'll turn up at one point, and then he's determined that he'll help her. She knows he will, within the rules and the consequences of the high table and all its machinations, and of the franchise itself. And that's part of the reason why I think people like it and love the films a lot. I love doing it, the movies. I've had a great time. Long may they continue, He gives her the information, but then it's like the classic. He says, I would, of course, advise you not to, I'd advise you to. But it gives her the information of where somebody's staying in another hotel, where she wants to know, does he know anything about this cult? But then she, of course, has what every character has to have in a film like this, which is free will. When he knows that she'll completely disobey him, or his advice. But when she comes back again, she's safe harbor. I always call Winston the Wick Whisperer. He's the keeper of secrets. He knows whatever goes on. But within the world, nobody knows where he fits. I mean, it's interesting, and I keep it that way. You know a little about him, you know something about him, but there's no need to know everything, you know? I think she was relieved to sit down and have a chat for a while. She'd been kicking ass in Prague for about 3 weeks when we finally did the scene together, you know, the scene, and the long scene in the middle when she comes to see him. No, I think, you know, Ana was a great choice for this. Apart from having worked with Keanu before, she did that turn in that Bond movie as Paloma, which was, you know, caused an impression. Because people could say, when she come back in the movie, she never did. Well, now she's got a whole movie to herself, Ballerina, and she handles herself beautifully, you know, I think. The action sequences are always great to watch. But Keanu pushes himself, which is, we've got to. He wants it to be right, wants it to be as perfect as you can be, you know. And she's the same way. She learned from, you know, she carried on the tradition. That's one more. And she looks at ease doing it. This is like fully fledged story, within a larger story. So I think it fits in perfectly. And the fact that next time they'll want to see them together. Films of this largeness have to be, and quality, because care is taken by, you know, I mean, everybody forgets afterwards the care that goes into making a movie when you finished it. The color grading, the sound, you know, the setting of it, the editing, as I said, the grading, the thing, and the preparing it for the cinema. So, yeah, it's really good. You should watch it.
One of the main ones is, you know, the Roscoroma is introduced to the director in Parabellum. And so it really gave us a chance to explore the Roscoroma more in terms of how it operates. You know, in John Wick, his dealings with the director, their relationship. So we're given a bit of an introduction, but in this film, we get to really explore the layers of what if somebody was coming in from the beginning. How does the training work? How does the ballet really tie into then combat and being an assassin? And so a lot of that was a fun, both on research and just developing what's the living quarters like? How's the lifestyle? And it's kind of strange form of like a boot camp barracks for the Wick world. That, also the Hallstatt, and with Gabriel Byrne's character and that tribe, a very new type of tribe. We've seen a lot of variations of assassin tribes in this series. This one specifically, and I really wanted to just make it stand out in an odd way, that it's much more like a cult than it is a tribe. So a lot of things that were nice to just expand on.
Grew up, his father was the head of this, you know, this tribe. You would imagine he would grow up in a certain way. He would grow up with wealth around him, with protection, with secrecy, with murder, with the loss of friends, not being able to connect too closely with anyone outside of that group. And whatever he's willing to fight for now, he's kind of got the same thing as Eve has in a way. They're going up against everybody, her for one reason, him for another reason.
I really took it from it's a protective father situation. We've seen assassins within the world that, you know, what changes somebody's dynamic and the morality that they're, you know, dealing with. So in the back of my mind, I was, you know, figuring out what time did he decide and have that change and not want that for his child. So I saw him really as a protective father. He's a badass, kick-ass assassin, but the person is a protective father. Prague Continental, and man, I went through so many iterations. I must have scoured, I do not know how many buildings looking for, one, something that was a different kind of Continental than we've seen before. In fact, this, the Continental, kind of a mix of an old world and kind of modern design. I based it off of, I was scouting for another scene on the riverfront and came across this large glass window door. And it was just a beautiful design, cobblestone wall. And I was like, that is the entrance to the Continental, which I have no idea what it looks like yet, but I found the door. And then everything just built off of that. I hope they'll take away that there's they have a familiar world. That, I think, is the most important, is that I love the world. I think the world that Chad and Shay and everybody created is so layered, so interesting, so strange in a cool way. So I would hope that they have a feeling like they're in the same world. but the experience is a completely new one. Very different kind of character. Eve is almost the opposite of John in terms of their path and their stories. So it's a very different experience, but in a world that we love.
It was really cool after John Wick 4 to have the opportunity to put the suit back on and to have some fun. I love John Wick, and it was, I only worked for a couple of weeks. I had about 8-10 days, but yeah, it was really special to play the role again. Yeah, Ana's intensity. Yeah, she was really focused. I've done a few films with her, and just as soon as we got into training, I saw her focus and her talent, and what was cool to see was that she was having fun. Like that while we were training and doing it, it was nice to see that she was enjoying it, And then when we would get the choreography together, to see her shift into her next gear, like wow, and go, was really cool to see. Yeah, I mean, seeing, training with Ana, and then getting to the scenes that we have. We use this word toughness. I mean, making movies is tough, but it's so much fun. Her character is she's lost some of her family, and she's trapped in a world. But what's interesting about the character to me is that she wants to do, but she doesn't know what she's actually saying yes to. So there's an innocence to the character, but a strong passion. And in a way, kind of still fighting in the same way that John Wick was for a kind of freedom, to get outside of the forces and that are impacting her life. She's a wonderful actress, so talented, and her, that core strength, that core being able to kind of draw that up and to show that and what was cool to see her do that physically, but also just in the stillness, in the scenes that we had together. She's quite a presence. We had a lot of fun. The film Knock Knock is basically kind of, it's a home invasion film with a twist in terms of what the plot is. And it kind of speaks to Ana's range in that she can do comedy, drama, action. There's really not anything she can't do. It was really fun to, she tortures me. And it was fun to play, it was fun she's a total pro. And with that comes trust and freedom, and you get to just, try stuff out. You can do improvisation, you're in the moment. You're basically playing, acting tennis. Here you go. Oh, that's what you're doing? Okay, then here you go. And Knock Knock is a really good example of that. In terms of like preparing for the choreography and for the fight sequences, it was very familiar to me as a kind of John Wick kind of process, because I was working with Jackson Spidell, who had doubled me and then had since moved on to choreography. Yeah, I mean, she had already been training for a while when I got there. I was kind of like the salty veteran, like, warm up, like, okay, let's go. What's the choreography? And then she was like, bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, okay, all right. And then, so it was, you learn the choreography, do some training. Ana's got a real good, once someone says action, she's there. She's like, let's go. So that was cool. Yeah, I mean, one of the cool things for me about being part of Ballerina is that it does kind of open up. You're getting to see more than, you see this kind of corridor or rooms or characters. And with Ballerina, we have Winston's back and Sharon, and John Wick, but you're also getting to meet new characters and, you know, a little Anjelica Huston's back, so a little bit more about the Ruska Roma, diving into, you know, how is the training, what is the culture, and then you're also meeting new hierarchies and new, you know, people with power. So you're meeting new characters and going into different rooms and kind of, you know, if it was a video game, you'd just be going, it's like open world. Like you can go like, okay, now we're going to go over here into Ballerina land. And so it was cool to be a part of expanding that world. I guess it's a little bit more about the family lineages, a little bit more about controlling towns, cities. What does it look like? Who's a part of it? What are the tendrils of the family? What do they want? The whys, a bit of it. So, I mean, it is focused that way, so you'll come to learn a little bit more about the history, heritage, and what it looks like. Yeah, Len Wiseman's a cool cat. You know, I had seen some of his Underworld films and really appreciated those. You know, I really appreciated how he was really sensitive to kind of taking the baton and being respectful but appreciative, but also wanting to do his own kind of things in the John Wick world. Yeah, he's lovely director, had a vision, and which I appreciate, you know, and you know, his action experience, and yeah, and I really appreciated how much he worked on the script and trying to get all of the scenes and the characters and their voices kind of in the world, but also doing his own take on it. Yeah, so Ballerina takes place when John Wick is basically traveling to the desert in John Wick 4. So it's kind of post John Wick 3, Bowery King off the roof, and kind of Bowery King and starting his journey that we learn in John Wick 4. So this is something that, from when I looked at it for my character, kind of takes place in that period of time. It's cool. He kind of gets called to do a mission, and he doesn't really have a lot of choice, but of course he subverts what they are asking him to do. John Wick has a kind of knowledge of Ana's character, Eve, her past, and is sensitive to that. He tries to warn her a bit about the road she's going down, the path she is taking. But youth, sometimes they don't listen. I'm just really, it's cool. I never thought, you know, when I started this journey with this role in these films, or the film, to be here over 10 years later, and, you know, had the opportunity to play the character multiple times. And it's been exciting to see the story continue. And I'm excited to see where it can go, but I'm really excited to see where it is, and hopefully people enjoy it.
Winston's the sort of, he becomes more and more the Wick whisperer, as I've come to sort of think about him. I mean, he's immaculate. He runs a hotel, so he's got to look like the most immaculate, like most hotel managers. He runs a hotel. He's a slick. Doesn't get involved in fights. He's a lover, not a fighter. He's there taking care of stuff. I think the addition of Ana, who's marvelous, I think, as the addition to this, I think also brings in another audience. The first time we met, the library scene in the movie, in this extraordinary location about 25 miles outside of Prague. She was great. And she'd come from, I think, about 3 weeks of kicking God knows how many men's ass. It brings in a woman, but in a natural way. She was introduced as as a young ballerina, as a girl. And then we get her full story, which seemed like a natural progression. You can see it again. They'll go back and see it 2 or 3 times and say, yeah, let's go, bring on number 5 or bring on Ballerina 2. This one will be great.
Met each other and we hit it off. And I knew it was going to go down how it went down, but she's so dedicated to her performance, to memorizing the choreography with a ferocity. There's you can memorize it and go through the motions, and then you can really like fight through it. And she had a very determined attitude through all of it, and from point A to point B, there's all these things happening, but she's coming at you. So she's I really loved watching her work. I liked hanging out with her offset. But yet it's one of those things where you're like, okay, you got to bring it. She's bringing it. Everybody's bringing it. You got to bring it. You're sort of stepping into an Olympic level of fight coordination. So you want to be the best you can. It was very impressive to watch her work. She's a badass. Their stories sort of parallel each other in a way. She's fighting everyone for a revenge, and Daniel's fighting everyone to protect the innocence of his little girl. So they're kind of on the same playing field when they meet. He's hiding in the hotel where you're not allowed to fight, but the money to cash in if you can kill him is raising through the roof. So he just automatically assumes anyone that comes through the door is fair game. But when they first meet, he's like, "What do you want?" And then he's like, "Can you please help me?" It's kind of a godsend that she shows up when she shows up for him. And then of course they fight their way out of there. But yeah, I it was kind of two storms meeting and then combining into a very large storm to get out of that building. So yeah, she was definitely an angel sent to help him. There's a lot of fun weapons in this. A lot of things that you would normally not think of as a weapon that are used as weapons. Eve uses ice skates in a really cool way. There's grenades. There's a grenade sequence that's kind of fantastic. With, I love the scene when the grenade goes off. She goes behind the big metal door. Boom. It's one of those worlds, the John Wick world, where they you've seen Keanu do it with pencils, with library books, so it's you knew going into this it was going to have very creative ways to use everyday items as weapons, yeah, which is awesome. What I like about it too is the assassins in the John Wick world, they're very honest, they're like, "Hey, so you working?" "Yeah, I'm working." "How's the wife?" "She's great." "Okay." And then they go kill each other. There's something very honest and cool about that. It's very, it's the only franchise I think that does that. It's like, "Hey, how you been? You working today?" "Yep, I'm working." It's kind of great. I think, these movies, you kind of start off in first and you go boom, 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 up to fourth, and it just stays in fourth gear the whole time. It just doesn't slow at all. There's no moments in between. It's just bang, 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 that it's such a exhilarating ride. It's like a roller coaster, just nonstop.
Anna and I, when we first got a chance to really dive into it, there was a lot to explore with the Rosca Roma in terms of, we see it in chapter 3. So there was a lot of fun layers to go through of what it would be like for somebody to start from the beginning and kind of work their way through Rosca Roma with the training and what that process is to actually get into the world. There was a lot of conversation with about what kind of like woman she is, and wanting to make sure that she also had her own voice. There was, with it being John Wick, wanting to really create a character that stands on her own, isn't any, not wanting to like replicate what John Wick does. She's on a quest, but it's the action that she's involved in is much more of just surviving through the fights whilst killing the people that are coming after her. But it creates a different kind of action and a different kind of flavor for what the sequences are that is very different language than John Wick. I gotta say, for a director, Ana was absolutely the best. It takes so much dedication, such discipline, but also the energy. I don't think a lot of people realize how much training, how much hard work it really is to, when you see actors talking about doing their own, fighting and stunts and such, especially for this kind of movie. This kind of movie they're much longer takes, and the choreography is so specific, and she was wonderful with it. When, she would just, when we'd start to work out stuff, she's like, is this gonna be me? Is this gonna be me? I hope this is me. And when you see that somebody is becoming just one of the stunt team and your actress feels like one of the stunt team, for a movie like this is incredible. One, it's fun. It's fun to kind of have her see how she has to be clever to find something, make it into a weapon. It is a bit more scrappy trying to survive through these opponents. There's a weapons montage in the movie. And I wanted to do that specifically so that we're going to team up. All right, she's got the artillery, she's got the support, and it just gets wiped out and she doesn't get to use any of it. And then we're suddenly kind of in the mountains going, what is she gonna do now? You go, okay, she's gonna use ice skates. Then what would that be like if she goes into a shed on the lakefront? They're fighting on the ice. That's difficult because they're slipping around, and it becomes this whole sequence that then is different. It's fun. I had a lot of fun. Very brutal. It's very realistic, but it has a fun wit kind of subtext to it. And so you're watching it. It's really kind of violent even, and you are also smiling at the same time because it has a cleverness that you're smiling through the pain. What they should look forward to, it expands in so many ways, and the world is so layered in terms of its mythology, and we get the chance to go in such a different perspective that we haven't seen before, because John's story that we've been following is a character that has essentially already been in and is looking to get out. So if you take it from a perspective of a character that is looking to get in, there's so much about that world that hasn't been explored, that we've had such a fun time building out what it would be like for that journey. So there's so much that is going to be new, and the thing that was important to me was to have the tone that is really so signature to the series, but it's such a whole new adventure that she goes on.